When this wealthy businessman's pianist didn't show up to his elite party, he mockingly told his black housekeeper to entertain the guests. She hadn't played piano in over 20 years. But the moment her fingers hit those keys, every millionaire in the room stopped talking, put down their drinks, and some even started crying. What they heard wasn't just music. It revealed the heartbreaking truth about why she had given up music decades ago and why this performance was actually an act of healing. Welcome to Stories of Black Lives. Before we dive into these powerful stories of respect, justice, and hope, please let us know in the comments which country you're watching from today. If you want to see more stories like this, hit this subscribe button. Please don't forget to like our video. It started with a missing pianist. That's it. That was the whole problem. Or at least that's what Thaddeus Covington thought when he got the call around 4:45 p.m. The pianist he'd hired for his annual summer cocktail party, some guy named Quentin from Tallahassee, was apparently stuck behind a 12-car pileup on I-75 just outside of Vetsa. There had been a fuel spill, 2 overturned semis, and a whole stretch of traffic crawling at less than 5 miles per hour. The guy wasn't going to make it. Not tonight. Thaddeus swore under his breath, turning away from the window of his second-story study, eyes skimming the lawn where tables were being set. Crisp white cloths, lantern centerpieces, servers moving around like chess pieces on a board. Everything had been lined up just right. Everything except the music. "I don't need this today," he muttered, tapping his fingers on the armrest of his chair. He hated last-minute chaos. He paid people to avoid it. Everything about Thaddeus, his 3 Rolexes, his 3 Bentleys, his real estate portfolio that stretched from Tampa to Montgomery, was about control. The door creaked open behind him. "Mr. Covington, the guests are starting to arrive." He turned. It was Celestine, hair tied back in a neat bun, apron on as usual, holding a silver tray in one hand like it was part of her body. She had been working in his home for about 11 years now. Quiet, efficient, never complained, always humming something while she dusted the picture frames or wiped down the marble counters in the kitchen. "Thanks, Celestine." He hesitated. "Remind me, do you still play the piano?" She blinked. "I haven't in a while." "Why?" Thaddeus smirked, only half serious. "I might need you to pinch hit." The pianist stuck on the highway. She gave a soft laugh. "That's funny." But Thaddeus kept looking at her. "Wait, you're not joking?" "Why not?" He shrugged, standing. "You hum all day long. You're probably better than that guy I hired. Just play something simple. Background music." The guests are drinking Pinot and eating goat cheese tarts, not attending the Philharmonic. Celestine opened her mouth, closed it again. Her hands tightened around the tray. "I don't think that's come on." Thaddeus waved her off. "Just for fun. It'll be charming." Charming. That word hung in the air like a bad aftershave. Celestine gave a small polite nod and left the room without another word. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. Downstairs, the guests were pouring in. Mostly Thaddeus's real estate buddies, some lawyers, 2 judges, and the wives of half the Rotary Club. Crisp shirts, sparkling dresses, the scent of high-end perfume, and fresh money floating through the hallways. The baby grand piano in the corner of the main room gleamed under the chandelier, untouched, silent. And then, about 20 minutes after Thaddeus made his suggestion, she appeared. Celestine. No apron, just a plain navy blouse and dark slacks. People turned as she walked across the polished floor. Confused at first, curious. A few chuckled softly. They thought it was a joke that Thaddeus was putting on some quirky little act for the crowd. She sat down without a word, adjusted the bench, rested her fingers above the keys, then silence, and then a single note. Then another. A slow melody, soft and low, like rain tapping gently on an old tin roof. The crowd shifted. Conversations quieted. Laughter faded. She kept playing. The music rolled forward, steady and haunting. Something about it made you forget where you were. Made you feel like you were somewhere else entirely. Thaddeus, standing near the staircase, blinked hard. He didn't know what he was expecting. A clunky twinkle twinkle, or maybe a few church hymns. But this wasn't just talent. This was something else. But nobody knew yet just how deep that something else went and why it had stayed buried for so long. She played like she didn't notice anyone was watching. Or maybe like she didn't care. Celestine's hands floated over the keys, her posture still, her face calm. But there was something in the way her fingers moved, like they remembered a version of her she hadn't shown anyone in years. The kind of version that didn't wear aprons or clean guest bathrooms. The music picked up slow jazz, then a brief turn into something bluesy, gritty. It wasn't polished like a conservatory student. No, this was lived-in music, the kind that came from life being a little harder than it should have been. A man in a pinstriped suit leaned toward his wife and whispered, "She's better than half the pianists I've paid to see." His wife nodded, eyes wide, glass of wine frozen halfway to her lips. Across the room, a younger woman, a marketing director from Jacksonville, who barely knew Thaddeus, quietly pulled out her phone and started recording. By the 5th minute, the room had changed. People weren't mingling anymore. They were watching, listening. Some with their arms crossed, others with their hands at their sides like they were in church. A few people sat on the floor near the edge of the living room rug, without even realizing they'd done it. And Thaddeus, he didn't know whether to be impressed or embarrassed because now it felt like the joke was on him. He'd asked her to play just for fun, like it was some casual thing, like she was a party trick. But what she was doing wasn't cute or charming. It was real, deeply real. He tried to catch her eye, but Celestine wasn't looking at anyone. Her eyes were fixed slightly downward, like she was seeing something none of them could. "Where'd you learn to play like that?" someone finally asked during a brief pause between pieces. It was Hezekiah Montrose, one of Thaddeus's oldest friends from college. Thick glasses, big laugh, the type to say what everyone was thinking. Celestine looked up. For a moment, she didn't say anything, then softly, "My mother taught me. She used to play every night after dinner. Same piano, actually." Hezekiah raised an eyebrow. "This piano," she nodded. "I used to play for her while she cooked. She'd sing while I tried to figure out the chords." A few people smiled at the image. "But I stopped a long time ago," she added. "Haven't played in over 20 years. I didn't think I could anymore." Someone from the back spoke up. "Then why start now?" She glanced toward Thaddeus, not with anger, just knowing. "He asked," she said plainly, "and I figured I've been quiet long enough." That line settled into the room like smoke. Thaddeus felt it land in his chest. And for the first time that night, he wondered what else Celestine had been keeping quiet all these years. The next piece she played was an original. No one knew it but her. It didn't have a name. She made it up when she was 17 and never played it in front of anyone before. It started soft, then climbed, then dropped again. Sudden and raw, like a voice cracking from emotion it couldn't hold back. Halfway through, someone started crying. An older woman dressed in pearls and a pale green scarf, dabbing at her eyes with a cloth napkin. She wasn't the only one. No one really clapped at the end, not because it wasn't good, but because it felt strange to break the silence. Like clapping would cheapen what they'd just witnessed. Phones were still out. Someone whispered, "This is going to blow up." Another person muttered, "Who even is she?" Thaddeus didn't answer, because the truth was, he didn't know either. But the world was about to find out, and so was he. As Celestine played, something shifted inside her. It wasn't just music anymore. It was memory. The keys beneath her fingers didn't feel like they belonged to Thaddeus Covington's luxury estate. They felt like home. Not the kind of home with marble countertops and walk-in wine cellars, but the one she'd grown up in just outside of Montgomery, Georgia, in a modest little house with a warped wooden porch and a stubborn screen door that slammed no matter how gently you closed it. Back then, the piano sat in the corner of the living room, old, scratched, with chipped ivory on a few keys. Her mother, Azalea Harrington, worked as a housekeeper, too, for a family that never quite remembered her name. But every evening, Azalea would sit down at that piano, apron still on, and play like she had a secret the world had never heard. That's where Celestine learned. "Watch your wrists," her mama used to say, gently tapping them with a pencil. "Don't bang, breathe with it. Let it speak." She did more than learn notes. She learned emotion, learned how to tell the truth through music, even when words wouldn't come. But then came the year everything changed. Celestine was 16 when her older brother Theron got arrested. He'd been pulled over on his way home from his night shift. Claimed it was a broken taillight. They said he resisted. Her mama said they lied. The case dragged on for months. Court dates, lawyers, fees. Everything in their house grew quiet, even the piano. Her mother stopped playing. Celestine tried to pick up where she left off. Tried to keep the music going. But every time she sat down, her fingers would freeze. The joy that used to pour out of her had been replaced with something heavy, confused, angry. Then Theron got sentenced. 10 years. They never recovered. Her mama passed 3 years later. Heart condition, they said, though Celestine always thought it had more to do with grief than anything medical. The piano got sold. Celestine moved to Lakeland, Florida, took a housekeeping job to make ends meet. She kept her head down, stayed quiet, learned how to disappear in plain sight, and for over 2 decades, she never touched another key until tonight. Now at 52, she was back at the bench, and with each note, the weight she'd carried for years started to slip off little by little. She played a song her mother used to hum when folding laundry, then one she made up in her head during her brother's sentencing, but never played out loud, then one with no name at all, just a mix of pain and love and something that felt like forgiveness. One of the servers, a young man named Jackson, leaned against the wall near the hallway. He wasn't supposed to stop, but he did, his hand still holding an empty tray, his eyes locked on Celestine. She didn't see him. She didn't see anyone, but she felt something lifting. Across the room, Thaddeus's wife, Ophelia, stepped beside him quietly. "Why didn't you ever tell me she could play like that?" He swallowed. "I didn't know." Ophelia looked at him like he'd missed something important. And maybe he had, because Thaddeus had never asked, never thought to. To him, Celestine had always just been there, a part of the background, reliable, quiet, invisible. And yet somehow here, she was commanding a room full of millionaires with nothing but a pair of worn hands and a memory full of stories. But that piano wasn't the only thing about to go viral. Something bigger was coming. Something that would crack open everything they thought they knew about the woman who'd spent years cleaning their floors. The video hit the internet before the party even ended. Posted by a guest named Cordelia Nightingale, a mortgage consultant from Jacksonville with a verified account and a knack for catching viral moments. She captioned it, "The maid just sat down and did this at Thaddeus Covington's party. I'm still in shock." It started slow, shaky camera, muffled background chatter, but then the music came through. Clear, sharp, unfiltered, no auto-tune, no lights, no performance fluff, just a black woman in a plain blouse playing like the piano had been waiting for her all along. By midnight, the clip had over 80,000 views. By sunrise, more than 3 million. Twitter caught fire. Who is this woman? Never seen raw talent like this. Someone get her a record deal ASAP. Why is she not performing in Carnegie Hall instead of cleaning floors? The hashtags were endless. Hashtag Piano Queen Celestine Harrington. Not just a Maid sh Thaddeus's party. Someone even uploaded a slowed-down version on TikTok. It racked up 2 million likes in under 6 hours. Thaddeus's phone started blowing up the next morning while he was still in bed. Missed calls, unread texts, emails from outlets he'd only seen on TV, Good Morning America, BET, even a producer from The Tonight Show. He sat up in his robe, rubbing his temples, trying to process it. Celestine, his Celestine? He didn't even know her last name until the 3rd year she worked for him. Now, she was a trending topic. Meanwhile, Celestine wasn't online. She was in the laundry room that morning folding napkins like it was any other day. She hadn't even seen the video. She didn't need to. She felt it in the air, the shift. The way people in the house looked at her differently, some wide-eyed, some a little too eager to compliment her, and one or two who avoided eye contact altogether. It was Ophelia who finally brought it up. She found Celestine near the back patio, checking on the linens. "Celestine?" She turned. "Yes, ma'am. You've gone viral." Celestine blinked. "Excuse me?" Ophelia pulled up the video on her phone, turned the screen toward her. There she was, playing, swaying slightly, eyes closed, hands moving like they belonged to someone else. She didn't say anything, just watched. Her own face looked like a stranger's. Ophelia's voice was gentle. "The world's watching now. I think they see what we didn't." Celestine handed the phone back. "They saw a song," she said. "They didn't see me." By noon, reporters were camped at the front gate. Camera crews, bloggers, curious strangers driving by slowly just to see the house. One woman shouted, "Is the piano lady home?" Thaddeus stepped outside, shielding his eyes from the sun. "Y'all need to leave," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "We're just trying to tell her story," one reporter said. But Thaddeus knew what this really was. They didn't want her story, not the real one. They wanted a feel-good clip, a Cinderella moment they could clip into 3 minutes and slap some sentimental piano music behind. But this wasn't that. Celestine didn't come from a fairy tale. She came from dirt floors, courtrooms, and graveyards. Still, the offers kept rolling in. Performance requests, press interviews, podcasts. Even a music conservatory in Miami offered her a scholarship. At 52, Thaddeus paced the living room, trying to keep up with it all. Part of him felt proud, like he'd helped discover her. But another part, the quieter part, started to feel something else. Shame, because he knew the truth. He hadn't discovered anything. She'd been there the whole time, mopping floors, scrubbing baseboards, humming Duke Ellington in the kitchen, and he never asked, never saw her. He had her in his house for 11 years and still knew nothing about her life or the pain she carried. But the world was about to learn what even he didn't know. And once they did, nothing would ever be the same. The first interview request she accepted wasn't from a big network. Not BT, not ABC, not NPR. It was a small community radio show out of Gainesville run by an older woman named Esperanza Caldwell, a former music teacher, now retired, who called and said one thing. "I heard your hands speak. I just want to hear your voice, too." That's what made Celestine say yes. They didn't meet in a studio, just sat together on Esperanza's back porch with 2 lawn chairs, a handheld recorder, and the sound of cycas humming in the background. No makeup, no lights, no agenda, just truth. Esperanza pressed record and said gently, "When did music become part of your life?" Celestine looked down at her lap. "My mother played gospel and jazz on a beat-up Baldwin. She used to say music wasn't just for entertaining. It was for surviving." "And when did you stop?" Celestine's throat tightened. Her fingers rubbed against the side of the chair. "I was 23. The last time I touched the piano was the night my brother was buried." Esperanza didn't interrupt. "I had just finished playing What a Friend We Have in Jesus for the service. My mother asked me to. I was shaking the whole time, could barely finish. Afterward, someone from the funeral home came up and asked if I played professionally, told me I had a gift." She exhaled slow. "That night, I closed the lid on that piano, and I never opened it again." "Why not?" Celestine looked up. Her eyes didn't water, but they were full. "Because I didn't want it anymore. Not if Theron couldn't hear it." Her brother, Theron Harrington, had been a cook at a diner, worked overtime every weekend, saved every penny he could. And yet, all it took was one police officer saying he looked suspicious, leaving a corner store with his friend after dark. No weapon, no stolen goods, just being there. The court gave him 5 years for obstruction and resisting. He served 4.5, came out different, quiet, tense, angry, always watching his back. He tried to rebuild, took a landscaping job, was working 2 towns over the week he died, hit by a drunk driver walking home because he couldn't afford a car yet. The man who hit him got a suspended license and 6 months probation. Celestine's voice stayed steady. After Theron died, the music started to sound like a lie. How could I sit at a piano and play something beautiful in a world that didn't treat him like he mattered? Esperanza asked, "Did you ever miss it?" "I missed him more," Celestine said. The interview aired the next day, and it didn't go viral. It didn't trend. It didn't blow up, but it reached the right people. People who had lost, people who had been overlooked, people who understood what it meant to bury your passion because it hurt too much to carry it. One caller left a voicemail after the broadcast. An older man, he said, "My daughter played violin. She stopped after we lost her brother. I didn't understand it until now. Thank you for helping me see her." Thaddeus listened to the interview from his car parked in the driveway. He'd turned off the engine halfway through, didn't realize until it was over that his eyes were wet. He thought of all the times he'd walked past her while she was humming in the kitchen. All the times he'd called her name without even looking up from his phone. All the times he thought of her as one of the help. She'd been grieving for decades and still showed up every morning, cleaned up after his guests, dusted around his ego. She didn't need a spotlight. She needed space and maybe someone, anyone, to actually see her. But Thaddeus knew an apology wasn't enough. Not this time. Thaddeus Covington had made his fortune by spotting value where others didn't. Old motel, abandoned warehouses, rundown properties in cities most investors ignored. He'd swoop in, clean up, repurpose, resell. That was his gift. He could see money where most people just saw a mess. But somehow, in all his years of flipping buildings and collecting keys to other people's dreams, he'd failed to see the person polishing his floors had been sitting on something priceless the whole time. And now the whole world saw it. Not because of him, but in spite of him. He stood in the doorway of the kitchen 2 mornings after the interview aired. Celestine was washing a pan, sleeves rolled up like nothing had changed, but everything had. "Celestine," he said. She looked over calm. "Yes, sir." Thaddeus stepped inside, closed the door behind him. "I listened to the interview." She turned off the faucet. "I didn't know about your brother or your mother or the piano, any of it." She dried her hands slowly. "I didn't think you'd care to know," she said, voice soft, not bitter. Thaddeus nodded, swallowing hard. "I didn't ask. That's on me. I've been blind, and I know it. You've worked in this house longer than anyone. I thought I was being good to you. Fair wages, time off, Christmas bonus. But I see now being decent isn't the same as being present." Celestine leaned against the counter, waiting. "I want to help," Thaddeus said. "If there's anything you need, less hours, financial support, a performance platform, just say the word." She gave a tired smile. "What exactly are you trying to fix, Mr. Covington?" "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe everything. Maybe just myself." That night, he called his PR guy. "I don't want to do some press release. No social media apology," Thaddeus told him. "Just help me set something up quietly." 2 weeks later, the Harrington Fund for Independent Artists launched, privately backed, anonymously funded, dedicated to older artists who gave up their craft due to loss, poverty, or trauma. The first grantee, Celestine, of course, but she didn't take the money. Not all of it, anyway. They met again on the patio. She brought sweet tea. He brought paperwork. "I had a feeling you'd say no," he said. "I didn't say no," she replied. "I said, I don't need all that." He looked confused. "I don't want a stage," she said. "I want a classroom, a place where women like me can learn or relearn what was taken from them." Thaddeus blinked. "Like a school?" "Not a school. A room, a few keyboards, a few chairs, and someone who believes they're not too old or too tired to remember who they were before the world told them to settle." He helped her open the space 2 months later. An old storefront in Ocala, next to a hair salon and across from a laundromat. Nothing fancy, but it had good lighting, a second-hand sign in the window, and 6 upright pianos rescued from churches and closed-down elementary schools. They called it Azalea's room, her mother's name, her mother's dream. By the end of the first month, they had 11 women enrolled, one man ages 41 to 76. None of them had played in decades. But they came week after week, learning scales, practicing posture, laughing when their fingers hit wrong notes, crying when they finally got it right. And Celestine, she didn't sit in the back. She taught. She played. She showed up. Not as someone begging to be noticed, but as someone finally taking up the space that always belonged to her. And Thaddeus, he came sometimes, not to take credit, not to pose for pictures, just to sit in the back and listen. For once, he knew how to be quiet. But Celestine's story wasn't finished. Not yet. Because the most powerful part wasn't what Thaddeus did. It was what Celestine chose to do next. 3 months after that party, the one where everything changed, Celestine stood behind a curtain, listening to her name being announced in a high school auditorium in Ocala, Florida. It wasn't a stadium. It wasn't a fancy concert hall with velvet chairs and cocktail service, just a public high school stage with folding chairs and a squeaky mic. And that's exactly how she wanted it. She stepped out wearing a black blouse and gray pants. No makeup crew, no press badge around her neck, just herself. The crowd, about 200 people, stood up. Some were students, some were community members, others were just curious folks who'd watched that piano clip a dozen times and wanted to see her in person. She took her place at a digital keyboard, adjusted the bench, and waited a few seconds before she started. She didn't smile, didn't wave, she played. The song wasn't grand or flashy. It was quiet, slow, the kind you feel more than hear. In the third row, a woman gripped her daughter's hand. In the back, 2 elderly sisters leaned into each other and closed their eyes. When the last note faded, the crowd sat still for a beat. Then came the applause, but Celestine didn't bow. She didn't soak it in. She stood and walked toward the mic. "I didn't come here to perform," she said plainly. "I came here to remember." The The room got quiet again. For a long time, I let my gift die because I thought my pain made it dirty. I believed that if you carried grief in your hands, you couldn't make anything beautiful. I was wrong. A pause. Some of you have talents buried under kids, bills, trauma, heartbreak, prison time, shame, whatever. I just want you to know it's not too late to come back to yourself. The crowd murmured in agreement. Some clapped softly, some cried. And if anyone in this room forgot who they used to be, or who they still are deep down, you're not alone. I forgot, too. She looked down at her hands. But these hands remembered. And now I do, too. The next day, Azalea's room had a waiting list. Not because of the music, but because of the story. Because of how many people were walking around, convinced their time had passed, that their light had gone out. Celestine showed them otherwise. She taught women who hadn't played since church as teenagers. Men who left music behind when their fingers got calloused from years of factory work. She showed them how to start over, not from scratch, but from where they were. She made them believe it was okay to be seen again. One afternoon, a local journalist came by for a follow-up story. He asked her, "Do you feel like you've made it now?" Celestine shook her head, laughing a little. "Made it where?" "Well, you're in magazines. You're teaching. You're being honored by local councils. There's talk of a documentary." She wiped her hands on a towel, thinking for a second. "I'm not trying to make it. I'm just trying to not disappear again." That's what stuck with him. Meanwhile, Thaddeus stayed out of the spotlight. People still brought it up now and then. The maid from the party, they'd say, trying to give him some piece of her success, but he'd shake his head. She wasn't the maid. She was the music. I just wasn't listening. He stepped down from 2 boards, shifted his foundation's focus, and started funding small community arts programs across Florida, mostly without putting his name on anything. It didn't erase the past, but it helped him sleep at night. And Celestine, she kept playing, not for cameras, not for guests, for herself. She'd wake up early some mornings, unlock the door to Azalea's room, and sit at the upright in the back corner, just her and the keys. She'd play what she couldn't say. Sometimes she played sorrow. Sometimes she played joy. Sometimes it was just noise. And even that felt holy. One morning, Jackson, the young server from Thaddeus's party, showed up to register. He'd been laid off, said he hadn't touched a piano in 10 years, and was scared to try again. Celestine smiled. "You're right on time. And that's the thing. The world is full of people who've been asked to shrink, to stay in the background, to carry other people's mess while silencing their own stories. But sometimes all it takes is one moment, one ask, one hand brushing against the piano key they thought they'd never touch again. And when that moment comes, don't run from it. Because it's not too late. Not for you. Not for your gift. Not for your voice. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who's given up on their gift. Tell them it's still in you. You haven't missed your chance. You've just been quiet long.